She was dismissed while pregnant by her billionaire COX. Now she walks back as his cardiologist, holding his life in her hands. You are going to die without this surgery, Mr. Ashcroft. The question is, do you trust the woman you discarded 8 years ago to be the one who saves you? Dr. Amara Siddiqui stood at the foot of the hospital bed, her white coat immaculate, her dark eyes steady as she looked down at the man who had once held her entire future in his hands. Daniel Ashcroft, billionaire founder of Ashcroft Ventures, lay pale and diminished against the stark white sheets, his usually commanding presence reduced to the fragile mortality of a failing heart. Amara, his voice was barely a whisper, dark eyes widening with recognition and something that might have been fear. Is it really you? Dr. Siddiqui, she said, her professional mask firmly in place. And yes, it is really me. The woman you fired for being pregnant with your child. The woman you told to choose between her career and her baby. The woman you publicly humiliated and discarded like an inconvenience when she needed you most. Daniel's heart monitor began beeping faster, his vitals spiking with the shock of seeing the woman whose life he had destroyed 8 years ago now standing over him in scrubs, holding his life in her capable hands. You are my surgeon. I am the only surgeon in this hospital with the expertise to perform the procedure you need to survive. Your heart is failing, Mr. Ashcroft. Critical arterial blockages, a damaged valve, and complications that require the kind of skill that takes years to develop. She paused, letting the full weight of the irony settle between them. The same years I spent building my career while raising the daughter you demanded I abort. Have you ever held complete power over someone who once had complete power over you? Have you ever stood in a position where the person who dismantled your life was lying helpless before you, needing your mercy to survive? This is the story of Dr. Amara Siddiqui, a woman who was dismissed while pregnant by her billionaire COX, who clawed her way from absolute rock bottom to become one of the most celebrated cardiac surgeons in the country. Now, 8 years later, that same man is lying on her operating table, and she must decide whether to save the life of the person who shattered hers. Stay with me through every moment of this journey, because it is going to remind you that the people who underestimate you are often the ones who end up needing you most. If you believe that karma always finds its way, hit that subscribe button right now and tell me in the comments what you would do in her position. But first, let me take you back to the beginning, to show you how a brilliant young woman went from being completely powerless to holding every single card. Dr. Amara Siddiqui commanded respect wherever she walked through the halls of Meridian General Hospital in Manhattan. At 33, she was the youngest chief of cardiothoracic surgery in the hospital's prestigious history, known for her steady hands and her ability to save patients that other surgeons had long since written off as impossible cases. Her reputation extended far beyond New York City. Medical journals featured her innovative techniques. Hospitals across the country pursued her with offers that would make most people dizzy with ambition. But Amara had built something here that could not be bought or replicated elsewhere. She had built a life, a career, and most importantly, a future for her 7-year-old daughter Zara. That was everything the man now lying in her cardiac unit had once told her she would never achieve without his protection. Dr. Siddiqui, we have an emergency. Her chief resident, Dr. Priya Mehta, appeared at her office door with the controlled urgency that Amara had trained into all her residents. Massive MI, 41-year-old male, helicopter incoming. He is prominent. Tech billionaire, apparently. Quite well known. Amara looked up from her surgical schedules with the focused calm that had carried her through medical school while working nights as a transcriptionist, through residency while raising a toddler alone, through every obstacle that life had thrown at her since the day she had been discarded by the man she loved. Vitals? Critical but holding. Blood pressure dropping, arrhythmia responding to medication. ETA 4 minutes. Prep or 2 full cardiac team, and get me his medical history the moment it is available. She was already moving. And Priya, his wife, flying in from the Hamptons apparently. She has connections. Amara nodded without breaking stride, already shifting into the clinical focus that had made her legendary. Wealthy patients brought complicated social dynamics. Demanding families, media attention, layers of expectation that had nothing to do with medicine. But in the end, a heart was a heart, and her job was to save lives regardless of who was attached to them. 15 minutes later, Amara stood in the trauma bay calling out medication orders when she caught sight of the patient's face, and her entire world tilted quietly on its axis. Daniel Ashcroft. The name that had once been whispered with tenderness after long evenings working late together. The same name that had been attached to the termination letter that had destroyed her life and forced her to rebuild it entirely from nothing. Dr. Siddiqui. Priya's voice seemed to come from very far away. Doctor, are you all right? Amara pulled herself back to the present with the precision of someone who had trained herself to do exactly this. Her medical instincts overrode the emotional chaos threatening to surface. Whatever her history with this man, he was a patient in critical condition who needed her expertise to survive. What is his cardiac status? Massive anterior wall MI, ST elevation indicating complete arterial occlusion. He needs immediate catheterization and almost certainly emergency bypass. Amara moved to the gurney, her professional mask sliding fully into place as she looked down at the man who had once promised her everything and then destroyed it when she had needed him most. He was older, silver threading through his dark hair, stress lines etched into his face even in unconsciousness. Still unmistakably the man who had swept her off her feet and then thrown her away when she became inconvenient. Cardiac cath lab immediately, she said. Full coronary angiography and echo. If it is what I think it is, he will need emergency surgery within the hour. A nurse appeared at her elbow. Dr. Siddiqui, his wife, just arrived. She is asking to speak with whoever is in charge. Of course she was. I will speak with her after I have reviewed his imaging. Saving her husband's life takes priority over family consultations. As Daniel was wheeled away, Amara stood in the empty trauma bay and allowed herself exactly 30 seconds to process what had just happened. After 8 years of building a life that had nothing to do with Daniel Ashcroft, he had reappeared in her world, completely vulnerable and entirely dependent on her skill for his survival. The irony was almost unbearable. The man who had fired her for being pregnant, who had told her she was not capable enough or ambitious enough to succeed without his support, was now lying unconscious while she decided whether he lived or died. Dr. Siddiqui, Priya returned with the imaging results and a carefully neutral expression. The angiography shows complete occlusion of the left anterior descending plus significant blockages in 2 additional vessels. His ejection fraction is critically low. Without surgery, we are looking at hours. Maybe a day if he is fortunate. And with surgery? Depends on the surgeon. This is complex, high risk. Most cardiothoracic surgeons would hesitate. Amara studied the films, tracing the extensive damage mapped across Daniel's heart. It was exactly the kind of case that had built her reputation. The kind that separated good surgeons from exceptional ones. I will do it, Dr. Siddiqui, given the complexity and Priya paused carefully, given all the factors involved, perhaps we should consider a transfer to... I said I will do it. Her voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had never failed inside an operating room and had no intention of starting now. Prep or 2 for emergency triple bypass. Full surgical team. Double the blood supply. And I want a perfusionist who has worked with me before. Yes, doctor. As Priya hurried out, Amara allowed herself one moment to feel the full weight of what was about to happen. In a few hours, she would be holding Daniel Ashcroft's heart in her hands, literally rebuilding the organ that had failed him. The same man who had broken her heart so completely that she had spent years wondering if she would ever feel whole again. But she had recovered. She had done far more than recover. She had thrived, excelled, and built a life that was everything he had said she would never achieve. Her phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Nair, Zara's nanny. Zara wants to know if you will be home for dinner or if she should save the dal she made all by herself with only a little help. Amara smiled despite the storm of the moment. Tell her I will be late, she typed back, but I want to hear every detail about the dal when I get home. She made her way to the family consultation room to find Victoria Ashcroft pacing before the windows with the restless energy of a woman accustomed to controlling every aspect of her environment. She was exactly what Amara had expected from years of society page mentions. Tall, impeccably put together even in crisis, with the kind of effortless presentation that spoke of a life in which difficult things were managed by other people. "Mrs. Ashcroft, I am Dr. Siddiqui. I will be performing your husband's surgery." Victoria turned, and Amara saw relief, calculation, and then something sharper move across her face in quick succession. "Thank God. Is Daniel going to be all right? Your husband has suffered a massive heart attack with extensive arterial damage. He needs immediate surgery to survive." "How soon?" Victoria asked, and then, remarkably, added, "He has a board meeting Thursday and we have a benefit gala on Friday that I have been organizing for 4 months. Amara looked at this woman who spoke about her husband's life-threatening condition as though it were a scheduling difficulty. "Mrs. Ashcroft, your husband's heart has functionally stopped working properly. He will not be attending any board meetings this week, or next week, or very possibly this quarter. But surely with the right treatment." "I am the right treatment. And I am telling you that your husband's recovery will be measured in months, not days." Victoria's expression tightened. "Do you understand who my husband is? Daniel Ashcroft does not slow down. His company depends on his leadership. His company will not benefit from his death." Amara kept her voice professionally even. "Now, I need to prepare for surgery, which I will begin in under an hour." Victoria's eyes had been moving over Amara's face with growing intensity. "Siddiqui. That name." She paused. "Were you not the coordinator? The one Daniel had to dismiss years ago?" There was some unpleasantness. I recall him mentioning it once. The words landed like a familiar blow, but Amara had built armor against exactly this kind of attack over 8 years. "I am afraid the details of your husband's past employment decisions are not my area of expertise. What is my area of expertise is the surgical procedure that will determine whether he survives the next 24 hours. I suggest we both focus on that." She walked out before Victoria could say another word and made her way toward the surgical wing, her mind pulling inexorably back toward the events that had brought them all to this moment. Back to the day when her world had been taken apart by the man who now needed her to put him back together. 8 years earlier, Amara Siddiqui sat in the glass-walled conference room of Ashcroft Ventures, her laptop open, her mind running 3 steps ahead of every agenda item the way it always did, as executive coordinator to the company's brilliant and relentlessly demanding CEO. At 25, she was the youngest person ever hired for a senior administrative role at the firm, selected for her analytical precision and her uncanny ability to anticipate what Daniel needed before he had articulated it himself. What no one in the company knew was that she had been chosen, in part, because Daniel Ashcroft was completely in love with her. Their relationship had begun 5 months earlier, growing from professional admiration to genuine fascination to something neither of them had planned or managed to prevent. Company policy strictly prohibited relationships between executives and their direct reports, and Daniel had insisted on total secrecy, not because he was ashamed of her, he said, but because he refused to let anyone diminish her accomplishments by attributing them to her proximity to him. Amara had understood that, had appreciated it even. She had worked too hard and too long to have her credibility reduced to gossip. But the secrecy had also meant she had no one to tell when she found out she was pregnant. "Daniel," she said one Thursday evening when the office had emptied and she had lingered, waiting for the last of his afternoon calls to finish. "We need to talk." He looked up from his screen with the complete attention he gave to things that mattered to him. "What is wrong? You look pale." "I am pregnant." The words settled between them like something that had changed the physical properties of the air. She watched his face go entirely still, every expression draining away as he processed what she had just told him. "Are you certain?" 3 tests. "And a doctor's appointment yesterday. I am about 6 weeks along." Daniel stood abruptly, moving to the window, putting distance between himself and the news the way he moved away from things that required processing. "This is complicated," he said. "I know it is not what either of us planned. But Daniel, I love you, and I thought we could figure this out together. The way we figure everything out." He turned back to face her and his eyes held something she had never seen in them before. A calculation that had nothing to do with affection. "Lydia, be practical. I am 3 months from the most important investment round in this company's history. The board is watching everything. A situation like this would create questions I cannot answer right now. A situation. She felt the first cold thread of something wrong moving through her chest. You mean our baby? I mean an unplanned pregnancy between a CEO and his executive coordinator that violates company policy and creates professional liability for both of us. You make it sound like we are nothing more than a compliance problem. In the context of this company, at this moment, that is exactly what we are. He said it with a gentleness that somehow made it worse. Amara, I am 33 years old. I am building something that has taken everything I have. I am not in a position to manage this right now. To manage this. She heard the word he was using and felt the full meaning of it land. You want me to terminate the pregnancy? I want us to make a rational decision together based on what is actually best for our futures. This baby is part of my future. It does not have to be. His voice remained even. And if you are willing to see that clearly, I think we can get through this without either of our careers being affected. She stared at him. What exactly are you proposing? Daniel returned to his desk and opened a folder that, she noticed with a jolt of cold clarity, appeared to have been prepared in advance. Amara, I am going to have to end your employment here. The sentence did not make sense for a moment. She sat very still, waiting for it to rearrange itself into something she had misunderstood. I am terminating your position, effective at the end of this week. You will be escorted out after you have collected your personal belongings. You are firing me. Because I am pregnant. I am ending your employment due to ongoing conduct inconsistent with company standards. That is how it will be documented. She felt the floor shift beneath her. You are going to fabricate a reason. I am going to document what is legally defensible. His voice was still measured, still calm. Still the voice of a man conducting a difficult but necessary business conversation. Amara, if you agree to terminate the pregnancy and sign a non-disclosure agreement about the nature of our personal relationship, I will provide you with an excellent reference and actively assist you in securing a comparable position elsewhere. If you choose to continue the pregnancy and contest the termination, the documentation I file will make it very difficult for you to work in this industry again. She felt something in her chest crystallize into something harder and more permanent than anything she had felt before. You are giving me an ultimatum. My career or my child. I am giving you a realistic assessment of your options. The baby is yours too. That, he said quietly, is not how it will be recorded. She looked at him for a long time. At the man who had held her in his arms the previous evening and talked about the future with the warmth of someone who meant it. She was looking for any trace of that person and finding nothing. Then I will build something that has nothing to do with your records or your references, she said. And someday, Daniel, you will have to face what you chose today. She walked out. The termination letter arrived by courier the next morning. Reason: conduct inconsistent with company standards. She was 25 years old, 8 weeks pregnant, unemployed, and standing in the kitchen of her apartment in Queens trying to decide whether she was going to fall apart or not. She decided not. What followed were the hardest and the most clarifying months of her life. She moved back in with her mother, which her former self would have found devastating and her current self recognized simply as practical. Her mother made biryani and tea and did not offer a single word of "I told you so," which was a form of love Amara would not forget. She spent her pregnancy applying to medical schools, a path she had abandoned years earlier when the corporate world had seemed like the faster route. Lying in her childhood bedroom with one hand on her growing belly, she understood with perfect clarity what she had always actually wanted. To save lives. To build expertise that belonged entirely to her and could not be revoked by anyone else's cowardice or convenience. Zara arrived on a rainy Wednesday morning in March, 6 pounds 4 ounces, with her father's dark eyes and her mother's uncompromising chin, furious and perfect and entirely herself from the very first moment. Amara held her daughter in the delivery room with no one beside her and felt something settle in her chest that had not been settled in months. "I am going to give you everything," she whispered to this small new person who had not asked to arrive under difficult circumstances and had arrived with full force regardless. "Not because someone helped us. Because I built it for you." Medical school with a newborn was its own particular form of impossible. Amara attended classes during the day while her mother cared for Zara, and worked nights as a medical transcriptionist, which had the practical advantage of paying rent while simultaneously immersing her in clinical language. She studied during Zara's nap times and after her bedtime, surviving on 4 hours of sleep and the particular fuel that comes from having a reason that is stronger than your exhaustion. On the nights when it became too much, when her notes blurred and her eyes burned and she could not remember what day it was, she would walk to the doorway of Zara's small bedroom and stand watching her daughter breathe, and the exhaustion would reorganize itself into something that felt less like suffering and more like purpose. Mama, 3-year-old Zara said one morning, climbing into Amara's lap in the middle of a landslide of medical textbooks and highlighters, "What are all these books about?" "Hearts," Amara said, wrapping her arms around her daughter. "I am learning how to fix people's hearts. Like when someone makes you sad. Like when a heart stops working properly and someone needs a doctor to help it start again. Are you going to be the best heart doctor in the whole world?" Amara kissed the top of her daughter's head. "That is the exact plan, baby girl." By her second year of medical school, her professors were asking her to assist slower students with material she had mastered well ahead of the curriculum. By her residency in cardiac surgery, she was operating with a confidence that her attending physicians noted in terms they rarely used for residents. In her 4th year of residency, her supervisor, Dr. Fatima Oyelaran, called her into her office and looked at her with the direct attention of a woman who had built her own extraordinary career in a field that had not always welcomed her. "You are working at a pace I have not seen in 20 years of supervision," Dr. Oyelaran said. "What is driving you at this speed?" Amara considered the question honestly. "8 years," she said. 8 years since someone told me I was not capable enough to succeed without his protection. I am proving that wrong, and proving it definitively requires everything I have." Dr. Oyelaran studied her face. "The person you are proving it to, is he watching? Then who are you actually doing this for?" The answer came to Amara that evening while watching Zara arrange her stuffed animals into what she described as a medical conference. She was doing it for the daughter who was watching every single choice she made and learning from it what women in their family were capable of. She was. By the time she was appointed chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Meridian General at 32, the youngest person and the first South Asian woman to hold the title in the hospital's history, she had long since stopped measuring herself against Daniel Ashcroft's estimate of her potential. She measured herself against her own, which was the only standard that had ever been worth applying. And now he was lying in her cardiac unit, and his life was in her hands. Outside or two, Amara completed her final pre-surgical preparations with the focused quiet of someone who had made peace with what she was about to do. Priya appeared with the last of the imaging reports and a careful expression. "Patient is prepped and ready. Full team standing by. His wife has been asking questions about you. About your background. I think she may have worked out the connection." Amara nodded without surprise. It does not matter what she has worked out. What matters is the patient on that table and the procedure that will determine whether he survives. "Dr. Siddiqui, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead. Do you know this patient personally?" There is something in the atmosphere today that feels like more than standard pre-surgical tension. Amara looked at her resident, this bright and earnest young doctor who reminded her of herself at that age, fierce and idealistic and ready to give everything to the work. "Dr. Mehta, whatever personal history exists between me and any patient stops the moment I pick up a scalpel. My obligation in that room is to the life in front of me, not to the history behind me. The man on that table is someone's husband, someone's son, someone who matters to other people regardless of who he has been in his private life. Our job is to give him the chance to be better, not to decide whether he deserves the chance." "Yes, Dr. Siddiqui. Because good surgeons save lives regardless of what those lives have cost them personally. That is what separates this work from everything else." She entered the operating room where Daniel lay unconscious and entirely dependent on her skill and judgment, and she thought, briefly, of the version of herself who had walked out of his office 8 years ago with nothing but a pregnancy and a determination she had not yet had the chance to test. That woman had become this one. And this one was about to give him back his life. Beginning cardiac bypass procedure, Amara announced as she made the first incision. "Patient is stable. Let us save a life." For the next 6 hours and 40 minutes, Dr. Amara Siddiqui worked with the precision and focus that had made her legendary, rebuilding the heart of the man who had once broken hers beyond what she had believed was repair. Twice during the procedure, a junior resident's breath caught audibly at a technique they had not seen before. Once the scrub nurse, who had worked alongside Amara for 6 years, caught the eye of the anesthesiologist across the table with an expression that needed no words. With every suture, every perfectly placed graft, every decision that moved Daniel Ashcroft closer to survival, Amara proved once again who she had always known herself to be. Someone who saved lives, regardless of the personal cost. She walked out of the OR into the early gray light of a Manhattan dawn and called Zara's nanny. When Mrs. Nair said Zara had left a note saying the dal was in the fridge and Mama was not allowed to let it go to waste because she had stirred it herself, Amara stood in the corridor of the hospital where she had just saved the life of the man who had tried to end her career, and laughed quietly from somewhere deep and genuine, because some things are only possible because of the losses that made them necessary. Daniel Ashcroft opened his eyes to the white ceiling of the cardiac intensive care unit and understood, before anything else was clear, that he was alive. The second thing he understood was that Amara had made that happen. "Welcome back, Mr. Ashcroft," a nurse said from beside his bed. "You have been unconscious for 18 hours. The surgery was successful. Dr. Siddiqui," he said, his voice rough from the breathing tube. "Can I speak with her? Dr. Siddiqui is completing another procedure. Your wife has been waiting to see you." Victoria appeared in the doorway before the nurse had finished the sentence, composed and precise in a way that had always made Daniel feel the particular loneliness of being married to someone whose primary concern was presentation. She settled into the visitor's chair with the practiced grace of a woman performing concern rather than feeling it. "Darling, thank God you are awake. I have been beside myself." Daniel looked at his wife and felt the exhaustion of years of pretending they were something they had never actually been. "Victoria," he said, "we need to talk about some things." "Your surgeon," Victoria said, before he could continue. "I know who she is. She is the coordinator you dismissed years ago. The one who caused difficulties." "She did not cause difficulties," Daniel said. "I caused difficulties. I fired her because she was pregnant with my child and I was too frightened of the professional consequences to behave like a decent human being." Victoria went very still. "Pregnant? With my child? I have known for years and I have never once addressed it, which is a failure I am going to have to spend a long time accounting for." "Your child?" Victoria repeated slowly. "Daniel, are you telling me that your surgeon, the woman who just operated on you, has a child that is yours? A daughter? She is 7 years old. Her name is Zara. And she was raised entirely alone by the woman I fired for being inconvenient." Victoria was silent for a long moment, recalibrating with the efficiency of someone who had significant practice managing unexpected information in real time. "And what exactly are you planning to do with this revelation?" Before Daniel could answer, Dr. Priya Mehta appeared in the doorway to review his post-operative status and begin explaining the recovery protocol. For the next hour, Priya walked them through the details of what lay ahead. Cardiac rehabilitation, dietary restructuring, medication schedules, activity limitations that would change the shape of Daniel's daily life for months if not permanently. "The single most important factor in your recovery," Priya said, "is the reduction of chronic stress. Your cardiac event was produced by a combination of genetic predisposition and lifestyle. Sustained high pressure, inadequate rest, poor nutrition, and what appears to have been significant ongoing emotional strain. All of that has to change, or we will be back here having a different version of this conversation sooner than any of us would like." "And his return to work?" Victoria asked. "Mrs. Ashcroft, Dr. Siddiqui rebuilt your husband's heart. She cannot rebuild his entire cardiovascular system. If Mr. Ashcroft wants to be alive at 50, the life that produced this event cannot continue unchanged." After Priya left, Daniel and Victoria sat in the particular silence of a marriage that had run out of useful things to say to itself. "This changes everything," Victoria said finally. "Perhaps it needed to change," Daniel said. She looked at him with the appraising attention she gave to things she was trying to accurately value. "You are going to end our marriage." I think we both know our marriage ended some time ago and we have been maintaining the appearance of it out of mutual convenience. Victoria stood up, smoothing her jacket with the composure of someone who had been prepared from childhood to handle social difficulty with outward grace. I will stay at my parents' while you determine what you are doing. When you have come to your senses about throwing away everything we have built for a woman who once worked for you and a child you have never met, you will know where to find me. Victoria, he said. She paused at the door. I am sorry. You did not sign up for this. You signed up for the version of me that was performing a life rather than living one, and that person was not fair to you either. She left without responding, and Daniel lay in his hospital bed and understood that he had, in the space of one morning, acknowledged his daughter, told his wife the truth, and committed himself to a version of his life that would require him to be braver than he had ever managed to be before. It felt, surprisingly, like the first honest breath he had taken in years. That evening, Amara came to his room for his post-surgical consultation, her white coat crisp, her patient file open in her hands, her professional composure entirely intact. Mr. Ashcroft, your vitals are improving at the expected rate. Your heart function should continue to strengthen as you heal, but the rehabilitation protocol is not optional and the lifestyle changes are permanent. I understand. He paused. Amar. Dr. Siddiqui. Please. After everything. Please just Amar. She moved to the window rather than meeting his eyes, looking out at the city lights beginning to appear in the early dark. What do you want to say, Daniel? I want to apologize. I want to tell you that I was wrong about everything 8 years ago. Wrong about what mattered, wrong about what I wanted, wrong about who you were and what you were capable of, which is perhaps the most absurd part of all of this, given that you have just spent 6 hours holding my heart in your hands. Apology noted. That is all? What else do you want me to say? That I forgive you? That I understand why you fired me while I was pregnant and threatened my career and left me to build a life from nothing? I want you to let me explain what I was thinking, even knowing it does not excuse what I did. I do not need your explanations anymore, Daniel. I needed them 8 years ago when I was unemployed and pregnant and trying to understand how someone I loved was capable of what you did. I have built an entire life in the time since. I do not need the explanations now. I need to give them. He said it simply without defense. I need you to know that firing you was the worst decision I have ever made. Not because you succeeded without me, though you have exceeded anything I could have imagined, but because I threw away the only love I have ever had for the approval of people who never cared about my actual happiness. I have loved you every day for 8 years, Amara, even when I was doing everything in my power to convince myself otherwise. She was quiet for a long moment. You do not get to say that to me. I know I have no right to say it, but it is true. If you had loved me, you would not have fired me for being pregnant. If you had loved me, you would not have threatened to end my career. If you had loved me, you would not have made me choose between my child and my professional survival. You are right. I was not capable of love then. I was capable of obsession and control and the performance of affection, but not of love in any real sense. Real love requires putting the other person ahead of your own convenience, and I failed that completely. And now I am lying in a hospital bed rebuilt by your hands, and I understand the difference. Before she could respond, there was a sound at the door. A small deliberate knock and then a voice. Excuse me, is this the room with the important patient? Amara's expression shifted in a way that Daniel had not seen before, something that was equal parts alarm and the particular helpless love of a parent whose child has done something they cannot entirely be angry about. Zara walked into the room with the purposeful confidence of a child who had decided where she was going and saw no reason to be tentative about it. She was wearing her school uniform, her dark hair in 2 braids, and she looked around the room with the clinical curiosity of someone who had spent enough time in hospitals that they held no mystery. She also had, unmistakably, Daniel's eyes. Amara said, "You are supposed to be in the cafeteria with Mrs. Nair. I finished my food." Zara moved further into the room, her gaze settling on Daniel with the steady assessment of someone taking an inventory. "I wanted to see where you work. The nurses said you were with someone very important." Amara looked at Daniel across the room with an expression he could not entirely read. "Daniel, this is my daughter Zara. Zara, this is Mr. Ashcroft. He is one of my patients. Hello, Mr. Ashcroft. Zara climbed onto the visitor's chair with the ease of a child entirely at home in medical settings. You look better than I thought you would for someone who needed a triple bypass. Mom says triple bypasses are the most complicated ones. Your mother is correct, Daniel said, and found that his voice was not entirely steady. She is an exceptional surgeon. I know. She works very hard. Zara studied him with her father's eyes. I am going to be a doctor too, but I want to work with children. Pediatric hematology specifically. That is a very specific goal. I read that children who understand their diagnosis are less frightened during treatment. I want to be the doctor who explains things in a way that makes them less afraid. Mom says the most important part of medicine is helping people not be frightened. Your mother, Daniel said, is very wise. She is. Zara settled back in the chair as though she planned to be there for some time. She also went to medical school when I was little and studied all the time, but she still read to me every single night and she never missed any of my school things even when she was very tired. She is the strongest person I know. Daniel glanced at Amara, who was watching their daughter with the particular expression of a parent who is trying very hard not to show everything she is feeling. She sounds like it, he said. Zara tilted her head, her assessment unhurried. Mr. Ashcroft, your company is Ashcroft Ventures. That is right. I have an idea for an application that would help pediatric patients understand their diagnoses in language appropriate to their age. I have been developing the concept for 3 months. Do you think that is a viable basis for a business? Daniel stared at this 7-year-old child who was pitching him a startup concept from a hospital visitor's chair. He thought he might be in love with her immediately and entirely, the way you fall in love with something that is unmistakably part of you that you had not known was missing. I think, he said carefully, that it is one of the most promising concepts I have encountered in a very long time. Tell me how you envision it working. For 30 minutes, Zara explained her idea with the methodical thoroughness of someone who had thought about it seriously and expected to be engaged with seriously in return. She paused to ask clarifying questions about funding structures, corrected herself twice on technical terminology, and at the end looked at him with his own eyes and said, I should go back to Mrs. Nair now. But I am glad you are feeling better. Mom will take very good care of you. She slid off the chair and moved toward the door, then paused. Also, she said, I know who you are. Mama explained it to me. I wanted to meet you and decide for myself. And what did you decide? Zara considered this with genuine seriousness. I think you did a bad thing, she said. But Mom says what matters is not the mistake but what you do after. So I'm going to see what you do after. She looked at him steadily, her father's eyes entirely unreadable in the way that only complete honesty can be. Do not make her cry again. She tries to hide it, but I always know. She walked out. Daniel and Amara sat in the heavy quiet of a room in which everything had just shifted. She is mine, Daniel said finally. She is mine, Amara said. I raised her alone and built a life for her that has nothing to do with you. But yes, biologically she is yours. I have a daughter. You had a daughter 8 years ago. You chose not to. There was nothing he could say to that, so he said nothing. After a moment, he asked, what would convince you that I have changed? That I am serious about being part of her life? Prove it. Tell the truth publicly. Not a managed statement, not controlled messaging, not a carefully worded acknowledgement. The complete truth about what you did and why it was wrong, and make it clear that Zara and I are not available for public consumption or media speculation. And if I do that, then we will discuss what supervised time with Zara might look like. Gradually. In ways that protect her from being disappointed if you decide this is too complicated. I will not decide that. You already disappointed her once before she was born. The question is whether you will disappoint her going forward. 3 days later, Daniel held a press conference from his hospital bed that became the most widely covered appearance of his career. He sat with his force still in his arm and looked directly into the cameras of 30 journalists and said, 8 years ago I did something I am deeply ashamed of. He said all of it. The relationship, the pregnancy, the termination, the threats, the years of silence. He said it without softening and without the careful qualifications his communications team had spent 2 days suggesting he include. He said that Dr. Amara Siddiqui had built an extraordinary career and raised an extraordinary daughter entirely without his presence or support, and that when his life had depended on a miracle, the miracle had been her. He said his daughter and Dr. Siddiqui were private individuals who deserved to live without scrutiny, and he asked the press to respect that. The world had opinions. It always does. But within 48 hours the story had shifted from speculation about Daniel to something that caught differently, the story of a woman who had been dismissed and threatened and left to start from nothing, and who had built herself into someone the man who dismissed her needed to survive. People recognized that story. They had lived versions of it themselves, or watched someone they loved live it, and they wanted it acknowledged. Zara went back to school by Friday. Her teacher reported that she had handled the disruption with remarkable composure, explaining to curious classmates that her family was private and she preferred to talk about her science fair project, which was about the fluid dynamics of arterial blood flow, and which won the highest marks the school had awarded in 12 years of the competition. "She is extraordinary," Daniel said when Amara told him. "She is," Amara agreed. "She gets her stubbornness from both sides equally." 6 months of consistent and undramatic presence built the evidence. Daniel was there for the science fair and the winter concert, and the Wednesday afternoons Zara spent explaining to him in methodical detail why pediatric hematology was more compelling than any other specialty. He was there when she was sick and when she won a regional academic prize and when she called at 11 on a Thursday night because she had had a bad dream and wanted a familiar voice, and he answered every time on the first ring without exception. He attended her school events as her father and nothing more, patient and careful and entirely without expectation of return, and Amara watched him do it with the attention of a surgeon monitoring a long recovery, looking for signs of genuine healing rather than temporary vitality. What she saw was genuine. She would not have said so if she had not been certain. They sat on her balcony on an evening in late spring, Zara asleep inside, the city below them, wine on the table that neither of them was drinking with any urgency. The particular quiet of two people who have run out of things to conceal from each other. "Amara," he said, "I know what you are going to ask. Is it obvious?" "To me." She looked at the city. "I know you better than you have always been comfortable with. You know me better than anyone has." He was quiet for a moment. "What you did to me 8 years ago cannot be undone," she said. "I am not the person I was then, and I do not want to be. She is the foundation of everything I have built. I know. What I can tell you is that the woman I am now is capable of something the woman I was then was not. She is capable of choosing love with complete knowledge of the risk. Not because she needs anything from you, but because she has watched who you are becoming and decided it is worth the risk of who you were." He was very still. "That is not a yes," she said. "It is a not yet. It is a keep going. Do you understand the difference?" "I understand," he said. "I will keep going." He proposed in March, in her Queen's living room, on an evening when Zara was supposed to be asleep and was positioned at the top of the stairs with her ear angled toward the conversation below in a manner she appeared to believe was not obvious. "Amara," he said, "I cannot offer you what I should have offered you 8 years ago, because that time is gone. What I can offer you is the evidence of the past year, and the commitment to keep building that evidence for every year that follows. I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you and to Zara that I am exactly the person you both deserve." There was a creak from the stairs that was not subtle. "Zara Siddiqui," Amara said without turning, "if you are not in your bed in 30 seconds the consequences will be significant and creative." "Mom," Zara announced from the stairs without any pretense, "say yes. I have been waiting for this for my entire life." The laugh that came out of Amara rose from the deepest part of her, the part that had survived everything and built something extraordinary from the pieces. She looked at Daniel and said, "Yes. With conditions. Name them." "Zara first, always, without exception or negotiation. Truth when it is hard, not only when it is convenient. Presence when presence costs something. And," she said, "if you ever make me feel again the way you made me feel the day I walked out of your office, I have access to surgical instruments and a thorough understanding of human anatomy." "Those terms," he said, "are entirely acceptable." Zara flew down the stairs and landed between them, and the three of them sat together in the small living room of the Queen's apartment where Amara had studied cardiology with a toddler asleep in her lap, and it was imperfect and real and everything that had ever actually mattered. They married 6 months later in the hospital garden, surrounded by colleagues who had watched Amara build her career from the ground up and who kept their opinions about the groom to themselves because she had earned the absolute right to make her own choices. Zara's school friends came on the basis of cake, which was vanilla buttercream, a detail Zara had personally confirmed with the bakery in writing following what she referred to in her speech as the fondant incident of the previous spring. Do you, Daniel, take Amara as your wife, committing to support her work and her independence, to choose your family above convenience, and to be the man your daughter has already decided to believe you can be? I do, Daniel said. With my whole rebuilt heart. Literally and in every other sense. Do you, Amara, take Daniel as your husband, trusting in the growth you have witnessed, choosing love with full knowledge of its history and its cost? I do, Amara said. And I am keeping my name professionally. Obviously, Daniel said, and the garden laughed, and Zara cheered from the front row with the unrestrained joy of a child whose most important wish had finally been granted by a world she had decided to trust. At the reception, Amara stood at the edge of the garden watching the people she loved exist together in the same space, her residents learning a dance from Zara's classmates, her mother in easy conversation with Daniel's sister, Daniel himself seated on a bench being gently corrected by a 9-year-old on a point of astrophysics with a patience and genuine interest that she had watched him grow into over 2 years of showing up. She had been dismissed while pregnant and left entirely alone in a city that did not pause for her circumstances. She had built herself from nothing with no assistance from the person responsible for the damage, and what she had built was better and more real than anything she could have constructed if none of it had happened. A career entirely her own. A daughter who was the most extraordinary person she had ever encountered, which was a significant statement given the people she worked alongside. A life with more substance and genuine daily meaning than anything the corporate world had ever offered her. And now this too. Not because she had needed it to be complete. She had been complete. But because she had chosen it freely, with clear eyes and full knowledge of the cost, which was the only way a choice like this was worth making. Zara appeared at her elbow with cake and the focused expression of someone who has an assessment to deliver. Yes, sweetheart. 9 out of 10. Only 9? Zara gestured with her fork. The vanilla buttercream was correct. Dad danced badly but tried, which I am counting positively. Mrs. Nair cried at the vows, which was very sweet. The string quartet played 2 of my requests. She paused. But the speeches ran long and I had prepared remarks that I did not get to deliver due to time constraints. This is a known issue. Amara put her arm around her daughter and looked at the life she had assembled from the pieces of something that had been broken deliberately and on purpose. Fair enough, she said. 9 out of 10. Zara leaned into her. Also, she said, I am really glad you became a heart doctor. If you had stayed at the company, none of this would have happened. She looked up at her mother with her father's eyes. I think things work out the way they are supposed to when you are brave enough to let them. Amara held her daughter close and did not say anything for a moment, because some things are true in a way that does not require addition. Me too, baby girl, she said finally. Me too. If you believe that the people who dismiss you are writing the opening chapter of the story, they will eventually be grateful you survived. Subscribe now and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Because the woman who was dismissed while pregnant by her billionaire CEO did not become his cardiologist by accident or by luck or by anyone's permission. She became his cardiologist because she spent 8 years building something so extraordinary that when he needed a miracle, she was the miracle. It was always her. It was only ever going to be her. That is what happens when you refuse to accept someone else's assessment of your ceiling as the truth about your actual capacity. That is what happens when you take the life handed to you as punishment and build it into a legacy, not for the person who meant it as punishment, but for yourself and for the child who is watching every choice you make and learning from it what brave looks like. Subscribe for more stories about people who were counted out and built something the world had to reckon with. Leave a comment and tell me what you would have done in that operating room. And remember this, the heart that has been broken open and rebuilt is not weaker than the one that has never been tested. It is stronger. Not in spite of what it survived. Because of it. Dr. Amara Siddiqui could tell you exactly why that is true. She has the surgical notes to prove it.